Hi guys, and welcome to today's video. So today I'm going to be talking about a topic that is interesting to me, and that is boredom. And I think it might be interesting to you, perhaps, watching this because of sort of the discourse online about how everyone is, constantly on their phones and no one knows how to be bored anymore. So that's kind of what I want to talk about. It's something that I've been tackling, let's say, within my own life, learning how to be bored, sitting with my own thoughts. So I was just interested in exploring the topic more and reframing boredom as something positive because I think it's often portrayed as something quite negative. And yeah, looking at how pleasant and enriching it can be as a state. Let's get into it. So, like I said, boredom is something that's often portrayed as quite negative. Time is something that must always be occupied, and idleness is something that's quite frowned upon. Arguably, and I've spoken about this before, this is a product of the kind of world we live in, where productivity is king, and every moment must be filled with something at best useful, but at least entertaining. Boredom, which essentially is empty space and time, is the total antithesis of a world that emphasizes constantly doing rather than just being. And boredom, in my opinion, is essential for being, for getting to know yourself, for getting to know the world around you, for unlocking creative faculties. It's sort of the space that allows us to form thoughts and make coherent thoughts from all of these inputs that we have in our day-to-day lives. Boredom creates the moments to bring every other moment together in a way. I think it is pretty essential for getting to know ourselves and the world around us. I think that the art of being bored, and I know everyone especially on Substack, everyone's always saying the art of this, the art of that. But actually the art of being bored has been quite lost. Or the art of being bored in a way that's beneficial. I feel like this was kind of a given before all of this technology existed to entertain us all of the time. Previously, every moment that might have been spent idly, not really doing anything, kind of just being wherever you are, or maybe on a task that is a bit more nourishing than doom scrolling, which enriches as much as it might entertain. Those kinds of spaces have been filled with this sort of background noise. I want to call it arbitrarily filled space filled with nothing. Rot has replaced rest. And very few people know how to appreciate space and all of the joy and creativity and self-knowledge that comes with that. Boredom has become something that we fear, that we run from, instead of cherishing and embracing. So I looked a little bit into this and I watched some videos and read some texts and things like that. And some people do take the perspective that we are bored, but just in a different way. Boredom hasn't completely disappeared, it's just sort of changed shape. And I came across this really interesting video and I can't remember where I saw it, whether it was on TikTok or on YouTube. I can't remember the creator, but this is not me. But basically someone was saying that boredom has been replaced with a version of itself that cuts away some of the core benefits that I'm talking about, like self-knowledge, creativity, etc. They described it as an occupied emptiness or something adjacent to that, which I thought was spot on, because this new kind of boredom is boredom that exists with background noise. It's the kind of boredom that we feel when we've been scrolling on our phones for too long. It's there is space there being filled by something, but it isn't fulfilling. So we still have this feeling of being bored, but without the actual space to do something with it for ourselves. We're still sort of hearing others. And yeah, I think this is worse, obviously, because it doesn't allow for, creativity, thoughts, etc. to flow by themselves. It actually just leaves us numb and stagnant. And I think this is the kind of boredom that we try to run from, even though by trying to run from it, we continue to participate in it. It sort of creates this illusion of boredom without any of the benefits of, actual pleasant boredom. So I keep talking about creativity and leaving space for your thoughts, but what do I actually mean by that? I would say think of the thoughts that you have when you're falling asleep, when you're in the shower, when you're sort of doing the dishes, that kind of thing. When your mind is left to wander without being occupied by anything other than the autopilot menialities of the day-to-day. This is when we begin to really reflect on the different events in our lives, to think of solutions to problems that might be plaguing us. It's when we can form patterns, develop links, and stretch beyond our immediate thoughts and impulses. It's in these moments of boredom, for example, that I think of a lot of the things I talk about in these videos. I take my lived experience and I give it space to form into coherent reflections. It's where my creativity flows, in these in between pockets of boredom. I think that might be the case for a lot of human beings in general. I'm making the case to try and create more of these moments in our day-to-day lives intentionally instead of filling them with noise. In a world that sort of demands us to constantly be occupied, I might argue that this actually is quite a radical act. So the philosopher Bertrand Russell, who actually is one of the very first philosophers I ever read when I was, I think, 15 or 16, which is crazy to think about, he explored the topic of boredom in a text of his, and he called it a distinctly human emotion, keeping in mind that he was writing last century. He argued essentially that we are the least bored we have ever been in the whole of human history right now, or then. I would argue even more so now. And that's not necessarily a good thing. Like I was saying, he basically talked about how it seems that we've grown to fear boredom, we've grown scared of it. He argued that it's an unfortunate place to be because it is through boredom that greatness kind of like manifests. He draws a lot of parallels between the great thinkers, philosophers, scientists, etc. of the time sort of before him, and discussed how all of these great people with great ideas all took the time to be bored. It sort of let their minds wander. They let themselves wander at the world. And this is where their greatest ideas were able to flourish. They did the work and then took the space to allow themselves to make the links that allowed them to, develop these great ideas. Russell opposes the sort of feeling, sensation, state of boredom to that of excitement, which is interesting if we look at boredom as sort of simple mundanity. He writes that a life full of excitement is an exhausting one, meaning that we need many moments of actual boredom for the sake of balance and equilibrium and for the sake of a balanced emotional life in a way. We can't really appreciate the exciting without the mundane. And I feel like this really well explains why so many of us feel almost like numb these days, like zombies, because we are constantly being stimulated, and that is not a natural state to be in. I think a lot of people complain about how they don't find so much joy in things, but it is because we are constantly microdosing dopamine to the point that it's hard to actually like feel it. We're never bored, so we can never appreciate what it is to not be bored, to be like in awe of something. I think that a lot of us operate at a baseline of always being entertained at every given moment. There isn't so much room anymore to like marvel at the marvelous. Russell gives an analogy of taste buds. If you have taste buds and they only taste like spicy, peppery food, eventually they will become numb to other flavors. And eventually even like it normalizes spiciness, pepperiness, right? By constantly microdosing excitement through our little dopamine devices, we are numbing ourselves to true highs, to the true extent of marvel and excitement. I spoke about wanting to do this video because of my own feelings, but also what I've observed online in terms of like the conversation around boredom. And there's sort of like a whole realm of people trying to overcome this. I mean, just honestly think of I've talked about this for all of the videos talking about, how to reclaim your attention span, etc. But one thing that really stood out to me actually was a few months ago, there was this sort of trend maybe, or like something that was happening on TikTok of people sort of trying to learn how to put down their phone and be a little bit more present. And the thing that they were doing was setting up a timer and then just like sitting and staring at a wall for, I don't know, an hour or something like that. And I found this really funny, but I also question how sort of like useful these kind of quick fix things are, because I feel like staring at a wall for 60 minutes sort of is macrodosing boredom in a way that is quite artificial. I don't think anyone is really going to ever be able to do that every single day reasonably. I think an enriching way to think about boredom comes from trying to integrate it into everyday moments. It's like going to the gym for 7 hours once a month and then never throughout. If you have the goal of like building muscle, it's better to go to the gym for maybe even like 7 minutes every single day, rather than this one big event that doesn't actually change anything on the behavioral level. I think this sees boredom as something to endure, and I don't think the point of boredom is to be endured. I think it's about learning to move through the world without the constant need to be entertained, to be stimulated, to be occupied. It's about being able to sort of be with your own thoughts and to let them flow and morph into whatever they might be. Sort of back to Russell, he also emphasized the importance of like a connection to nature in order for us to pursue boredom in a way that's sort of like enriching and organic. And I think I really agree with this perspective, especially when we compare it to, just like staring at a wall. So I think that the sense of disconnection that a lot of us feel in this day and age, this numbness I was talking about, also this feeling of sort of occupied emptiness, this comes from partially quite a big disconnection to nature. There are a lot of meaningless things that we fill our time with in order to remain constantly stimulated. So boredom has become something wholly almost negative, like I keep saying, because of the conditions under which we force ourselves to endure it. Russell suggested that if we shift this so that we have more contact with nature, with the world around us, we will find a fruitful kind of presence that replaces this kind of emptiness that we've grown accustomed to. And again, I think this comes in such small moments. A connection to nature just means like embracing being outside, being on a walk maybe, or making your way somewhere and not pulling your phone out at a traffic light, just being where you are, these natural moments of natural boredom in the natural outside world. I think this is what we need more of. But when I was reading sort of Russell's ideas on like this disconnection to nature being one of the main reasons we struggle so much with being bored, it made me think a lot of the poet Mary Oliver. Her work really centers nature, getting lost in it and the joys that come with that. Small moments between oneself and the world around you. If you haven't read Mary Oliver's poetry, I highly recommend that you do, because I really, really do believe that it shows the power of, so-called boredom in combination with the natural world, with a connection to the natural world. A lot of her poetry sort of connects nature to the human experience, and how creative she is with small moments is a prime example of the kind of creativity that can flourish when an intentional connection with nature is prioritized or cultivated or grown. The sort of vast majority of Oliver's poetry relates to nature, getting lost in nature, self-discovery through nature, the process of all of that. Boredom in such an environment, in my opinion, really, really can be a gateway to creativity and self-knowledge and self-discovery. Oliver reminds us through her poetry that the natural world is something that persists through sort of all of our emotions, all of our fickleness, all of our sort of very human whims. So by connecting to it, we repurpose boredom in a way and realize that a sort of possibility in just being and sort of enjoying all that comes with. A lot of what I've talked about, looked into, etc. in this video has come from me examining my relationship to boredom and trying to learn how to connect more to my surroundings. It is in moments of like day-to-day mundanity, washing the dishes, having a shower, etc. that I really, really try and not be occupied. I try and not have a podcast on. I try and not have music playing. But then it's also in moments where I could be fostering a connection to the natural world. Like if I am walking to work or biking to work, also just trying to look around and be there and let my thoughts roam and wander and only be stimulated or only be concerned with what is immediately in front of me, what I am in, rather than trying to sort of distract myself from that. One moment in which I was really thinking about this actually was on a plane recently, 30,000 feet in the air, going somewhere. I've always been kind of awestruck at planes and the fact that we can fly and we're so high up, and I am the person every flight, taking hundreds of flights, who will look out of the window at every single time and be like, wow. And I just think that this sense of marvel, this sense of awe is so special. It gives me so much perspective on things every time I'm just like in the air doing that. And I see all of my fellow passengers around me who are, maybe on their phones, watching something on Netflix, etc. And I'm just like, guys, we are literally flying. Why aren't we looking at the fact that we're flying? Why have we gotten so used to not realizing how incredible these things are? And I think intentional boredom in small moments is the kind of thing that eventually will lead you to have this sense of like wonder again at the world. And honestly, it is, like I said, it's in these moments that I am able to find new angles and old issues in my life. I can dream, I can wonder, I can sort of ideate for my writing and sort of just look around and notice the world. I think learning how to be bored has been so good for my like mental and creative well-being. It's made me the most like sort of mentally well that I have been in a pretty long time. It allows me to, take the time and the space to be with my thoughts and to simply just feel how I feel. So I vote that we all learn how to be bored again. Ideally to sort of reinvite excitement into our lives to the extent that it can occur, to not be numbed to everything, but also to be able to, create presence and a sense of knowing and invention that can only come through space, through kind of just being where you are in the most ideal world, in congregation with nature, and welcoming all that comes with this feeling and not running to occupy it. Yeah. So that's my take today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please, comment again. Love to chat about this stuff. Like the video if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more of me. Please. I hope your takeaway from this is to go and just be somewhere. Until next time, take care and I will see you soon. Bye.